at LEED Silver certification. Viridian Tax Increment Finance area, it's over there adjacent to the Central Oregon Community College and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is actual partnership between COCC, the developer, and the city of Bend to take publicly owned land by COCC and turn it into more affordable housing units. This is 2.81 acres. It is going to be 15% of units at 80% AMI for 20 years. And they intend to use 51% of local contractors. Yeah, so that's it. I do have some facts and figures for you, just in case. Stop sharing. So in your letter that Todd provided to you, I'm assuming, there's a breakdown of impacts to the county library and also the actual revenue projections for your bond. So the way that I phrase this is all three of these areas are undeveloped parcels. They have remained undeveloped for 20 years or more. So really the true impact that we've told all of our corresponding taxing districts is the true loss is going to be on the increment of your undeveloped land. The reason we don't count the foregone revenue of the actual developments is because these developments need TIF in order to be developed. But by law, we have to tell you what foregone revenue you will miss if these developments were to occur without TIF. But your loss of increment revenue on unimproved land over the next 32 years is only $44,000. But your foregone revenue if these projects were to occur without TIF is $3 million. But unlike other property tax exemptions that the state and the city have implemented in order to spur housing development and more affordable housing, urban renewal does not affect bonds and levies that are passed by the voters. So your bonds and levies are not hit or diverted. But if this was like MUPTI, your bonds and levies would have been wiped clean. So you would not have gotten those for 10 years. But with urban renewal, your bonds and levies, your county library bond is protected. Questions?
Why is the 80 to 90% AMI amount so low? I mean, I'm assuming it's on the lower end, but you correct me if I'm wrong.
Are we talking
The
about
15 to 20% of units falling within that 80 to 90% AMI.
Good question.
And does the 80 to 90% AMI fall in the capital A affordable category?
Okay, I'll answer the first question. So when MUPTI was going through the process last year, a lot of our community members were not exactly thrilled that we were providing tax abatements to facilities that weren't providing some level of affordability. These were market rate. The catch-22 is economic 101 is more supply equals less demand, which reduces overall rent. However, taking our feedback from not only our taxing districts, but our partners in the community, they wanted the next policy to have some sort of affordability. Given the current interest rates, tariff discussions, what we have found is that if these developments would have occurred in 2019, under then interest rates, they could have saved $36 million in interest payments alone. And just to give you an idea of what the average rent was in Bend in 2019 was $1,400. Today it is $2,300. So the reason why it's 15% bare minimum is because that is what is only penciling right now for naturally occurring affordability. So not only are we trying to incentivize more units, because as of January of 2025, the state through Governor Kotek and OHCS has identified 33,000 units have to be built in Bend. And so we have 8,500 that we have to meet by 2030. And so we're trying to really thread the needle of producing units, but also ensuring there's some level of affordability. It has been indicated to me by the city council that after our second round, you'll get one more of these letters in the coming months. We're pausing the program and relooking at, do we require more units at more affordability? Should we have greater levels of affordability? Whether that's like 70, 60, 50. The city does have programs for anything at 60% and below. We don't have a lot of programs between 60 and 100% AMI. So, and that's our middle missing income folks. So I don't have the answer of how we're going to approach that yet. And then your second question, where does this fall into the capital A? Capital A affordability for multifamily unit is 60%. And for home ownership, it's 80%. And so we're trying to figure that out right now. And Ben is, I will say this, is on the leading edge of trying innovative ideas to help our community with affordability and also overall unit production. But we also have to be mindful that, one, we don't want to completely impact our taxing districts, but then also increase taxes on our residents. So we're really, I'm not, city council is trying to thread that needle.
Yeah, I thought that the Park District letter to the city really, a lot of the things that they said in that resonated with me as far as what are we doing to help true low-income people find housing, because I mean, obviously that's at a crisis point in our community as well. And so we're giving a lot of help to the upper end of the scale and less help to people that really are probably getting hammered by these increases more than anybody, you know. So, and I realize it's a balance. But it's also, I think, incumbent on the city to lead in that direction also. I sometimes feel like people separate the affordable housing issue and the homelessness issue to the degree that it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it's obviously intertwined. And so I would encourage the council to take a look at getting those rents down even further. Because I mean, $2,400, $2,300 as an average rent is just not accessible for a huge segment of our community. And shunting people off to other towns because the rents are less expensive isn't a really good long-term solution for equity in our community. But that's just a personal opinion. I know these are difficult decisions to make. So I appreciate the position the city is in, but that's kind of my take on some of this.
Well, I'd like to add, and I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with us. I think from a philosophical perspective, I have a little trouble with TIFs because the library district was intentionally created by voters to ensure stable, protected funding for library services. And so a TIF redirects these funds, which is intended for library services, to without input from the library or the voters, and it undermines the purpose of a special district.
Right.
So that's the challenge that I have with a program like this.
I was curious as to how the timeline is determined. One was 30 years and one was 32 years. And how was that evaluated and determined?
Yeah, so for example, if you look at the Meridian, the 24-year plan, it's a flat parcel owned by COCC, so a lot of site challenges are non-existent. Century, that is craggy land that's not been developed for 20 years. Bend Athletic Club has looked at it. There's been a lot of looks at that particular parcel. There's actually a seismic fault line that goes through that parcel. And so in order to maintain that affordability of what we're trying to accomplish, they actually requested for an economic incentive just in general about if we're able to have a few more years, we can actually leverage that with our development investments to actually make the property developable. So that's how we took into account the variations of the TIF plans. And to respond to that, I totally understand where taxing districts are coming from on the redirection of an existing permanent tax rate levy that's been approved by the voters. In the state of Oregon, we are allowed to have 15% of our acreage and 15% of our assessed value in urban renewal areas. And just to kind of give you an idea of where the city of Bend is at in terms of that cap and maximum, In terms of our AV right now, so the 15% is our cap. We cannot go above that by state statute. We're at 7.4%. In terms of our AV, 15% is the cap. We are at 3.8%. So to defend the city council and their decisions, we haven't maximized it like Portland has, or like Eugene or Salem in those communities. And it affects the general fund of the city as well, so. But I'm staff, I'm here just to represent.
Right, we understand that. We don't need.
I'm not a policy advisor.
Right, right. Okay,
And Tiff, if they actually incorporated some of that and we could lose, do we have a means of opposing it or taking that to court or?
I think right now is your opportunity to weigh in on it. The city needs, what, 50% of the?
No, there is no requirement of
Oh.
taxing district boards for the utilization.
Oh, okay.
That's what.
Oh, okay.
board member was applying to.
Yeah,
But in order for city council to take your official comments, there actually has to be a voted on comment by your board to submit to city council. That's what BPRD did.
yeah.
Or you could just vote to say we concur with BPRD's board. We could put that into the public comment as well. So you have until May 21st.
okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
That's the difference between MUFTI and urban
Okay,
renewal,
thank you.
right? MUFTI required all those votes, and then
Yeah.
urban renewal, to your point, is we're authorized by state statute, and we
Yeah.
can use those funds as a CFIP.
And the commissioners took a vote last week to just state their feelings about this, if I remember that.
2-1, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Jonathan while he was here? Okay, well, we appreciate you coming and filling us in on this and
And if the Bend Urban Renewal Agency / City Council, because they're the same body, request a reanalysis of the policy, I'd be more than happy to come and have a work session with you to see what works, what doesn't.
Okay.
What is needed. If the library board is going to be foregoing revenue, what would you like to see out of a policy as such?
right. Okay, okay.
I just committed counsel to that, so don't get in trouble.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, thank you very much for coming.
Yes.
And so on that, there's no action required, but it's up to the board if you want to make some type of statement.
Statement.
So I was gonna ask if that's,
In the past, on the Mufti ones, we have not because our vote didn't count anyway.
sure,
We were all it took was the city and the school district and it was done.
yeah,
In this one, we can register a comment if people would like to. In general, I would say the library's stand has been not to involve ourselves in other entities. Responsibilities and decision-making around things that we don't have any purview over, but this does affect
Yeah,
the amount of money that we have to deliver library services. I thought the Parks District letter lining that out was, the stakes are much bigger for them
yes.
than they are for us, but I think, and to your point, this chips away at money that people had intended to be used for library services, and the fact that they're under their caps is fine, but it still has an impact on what we can do.
Well, and I guess I looked at that cap like, wow, there's so much more room to do more of these.
Right.
I mean, a lot, and so
With no comment, with no recourse on the special districts.
right. So
Part.
I would not be opposed to submitting a comment, but I know that would be something the board hasn't done before, so I.
Well, no, but it is within our purview to do that, because I think they'll never take that into consideration if no one ever speaks up.
Exactly.
I think I would have to abstain from that particular. If we could separate out the two properties from the COCC property as a COCC
No.
employee.
Right,
And
right.
speaking of, I don't know where I fit into all this as a city offended employee. I forgot I was gonna.
Right.
And the hard part really for me, all of this would be great if we saw them sunset. And I've only
Yes,
seen one
exactly.
sunset, and that happened during the Great Recession when the city, and it was in Redmond, needed the money.
Yeah.
And so they ended it,
Right,
and
I think that's.
that's when we started getting some money from that area, but I have never,
That is a good point.
in theory, at some point 30 years from now, the library is gonna just come into a lot of money.
Right.
But they can always renew all
Yeah.
these.
Right, and given their track record on the existing three, it has fallen far short of what
Oh, yeah.
their projections were. Because I can remember when we were discussing this earlier, and Murphy's Crossing, there's been nothing that's happened on that. And they're using transportation bond money to do what they're doing in the core area. So it's not like the city is making an investment in that area particularly, and Juniper Ridge, we all know about Juniper Ridge, so. Their track record of development has not been stellar for the amount of money that we've given up over the years. And
And I guess I bring it back to what was the purpose of a special district being created?
right, yeah, no, yeah,
And that is exactly the issue that Parks and Rec, that the library faced prior to being a special district. The city, the county saying, we don't have enough funds to offer these services any longer, or we're reprioritizing them.
right,
And the community saying, we want these services, so we will increase our taxes in order to ensure that library services are protected.
right. I philosophically, I agree with you completely.
And it was about 5 people.
Yeah.
It wasn't a delegation.
Right. Well, what would you like to do about this, given potential conflicts?
I would say, really, whatever we do doesn't, I hate to say it doesn't matter, but
Sure,
I'm thinking it might be good at a future work session for us to come up with a general.
Just a general
statement
response.
around the impacts of these, and just stating that we're aware. I kind of like what the Parks and Rec did, where they listed out what the impacts are.
Mhm.
Ours aren't quite as direct and severe, but they're, we should acknowledge that there is an impact, especially when they're talking about, the goal is to help homeless. Well, in the meantime, we're the ones that are serving.
yeah, absolutely.
Right, exactly. We're the ones that are directly serving the affected people, and their definition, as Parks and Rec pointed out, of blight is pretty thin. These are not blighted areas at all. They may not have been developed yet, but they probably have not been developed because city zoning precluded their development, as we saw in the Britta Ridge area. So to claim that those are blighted just because there's nothing on them right now is pretty specious, in my opinion.
Well, I still am in favor of submitting something by the 21st if the rest of the board is interested in doing that.
We could just have a simple statement that we concur with
We could do something.
with
Yeah.
Parks and Rec, the sentiments expressed in Parks and Rec,
Mhm.
and just a general statement about the importance of special districts and the charge from voters, and that they wanted these funds set aside for this specific purpose, and this
Preserving
Yep.
that.
Yeah,
We could definitely draft something for you to. So I guess we have to. do we- No,
So-
sorry, we don't have to vote on it.
I thought you said we had to vote on
the,
something.
yeah,
Oh,
he
that's
said the board has
To
to,
vote on
it
it.
has to be a board vote.
So,
To
So
submit to city
do we
council.
need to make a motion to vote on, or?
Or you
a
could
motion
direct,
to-
you could direct Todd and I to work on,
All right, I direct you guys, Todd and Ian, I make a motion to direct you to write a statement on behalf of the board. In response to the TIF proposal presentation.
Mhm. I'll second that.
Thank you.
And I will abstain.
okay,
okay,
all right. Any further discussion on that?
Thank you for having him come out, Todd.
okay,
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Mhm.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay,
Thank you.
all right. But I also like Todd's suggestion that we craft a general response.
yeah,
Which will, I mean, this will probably be brief, but, but the general response, I think, will be more lengthy, more complete, because I think it's kind of it is a basic philosophical issue.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. Would you like to give us your report?
Absolutely. So it was kind of a slower month this past month as far as.
oh, sorry,
Yes.
the food is here, if you don't mind, Greg, if
No,
people get up and get food while you're talking, that.
I don't mind.
Just allow that, so,
Okay.
That's-
go ahead. Well, we only have half an hour, so.
Oh,
that's nice.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Mhm. So feel free to jump up. I can speak loudly. Yes. And like I said, the month was somewhat a little bit slower. From a schedule standpoint, there's really no changes in the schedule and what we're doing. It's tracking along generally consistent with the last master development schedule. We are always updating and checking our schedules, and we're doing that again now. Just to definitely come out of the winter months and stuff.
And pickles.
Have looked at what kinds of impacts are going on the central library, where the most of the work is. The other projects are generally in closeout, wrap up, and then downtown Bend is tracking to our schedule, going through the city plan check process, and also now we've commenced into our GMP preparations for downtown Bend. So schedule wise, everything is moving right along. I do expect to be updating our master development schedule, potentially here by the end of May, and then we'll talk about it in June. Definitely by end of June, and we discuss it in July, just to, as we look at how we really fine tune the schedule, there's a lot of moving parts relative to central that we're working on, studying and reevaluating our options. So from a schedule standpoint, that's where we're at. Budget, no changes to the budget this month. Everything's kind of moving right along. We'll have a few coming up this next month, but the past month has been pretty stagnant, or static.
I was gonna say that.
Not stagnant, but just static, no change. Status quo, how's that? But, so as you've seen, everything said unchanged as is, and so that's really where it's going there. On procurements, it's just the past change orders and contracts that we talked about have been processed, and we're going through our insurance policy. I did note that, we put the new builder's risk policy in place to cover all of our post-construction activity on the branches. As we go through to make sure that we're properly, covering that risk with a separate policy that broker recommended. From a design and construction standpoint, where most activity is out at Central Library and, Kirby is marching right along under construction, as you've probably seen in some of the photos and videos and stuff. There's a lot of great activity going there. All of our FF&E is moving along. We went through and processed the furniture order last month, and that's being put in place, and orders are starting to go into the manufacturers. Our early learning stuff is well into production. We have early learning pieces that are completely finished and sitting in the warehouse, and others that are in production. But those are all moving right along, and same with our shelving systems. We've been dealing with some modifications to our shelving as a result of a building code issue about access, because of our access floor and how we get at equipment underneath that. And so we're working through that right now with the team on how we make some adjustments. There was potential to have impacts on the construction, but there was a solution that could be made through modifications to our shelving system that benefits us on construction, not changing the work out there, but changes our shelves. Some of the changes are good changes, but they do cost us some money. And we'll be able to report on that this next month. But that's one of the bigger activities we have been dealing with the past few weeks with the city, with our team, and with EPL on how to mitigate that. And so it's something that didn't even put it in the report because it's literally just come up recently, but I'll give you a little heads up. That's something that we'll talk about in June, and because they're at that point, it'll be ready to process authorizations for those dollars on that. So, that's one kind of activity that's really come up that's of that nature. At Central, the developer is really making great progress on their work, and that affects us directly in the opening of 27th Street and Wilderness Way. And we were out yesterday at the site and walking around, and we watched them put the final lift of pavement on 27th Street.
Oh, wow.
And so they are ready. They are intending to open 27th Street back to the public, the main route, within the next month.
Wow.
And then they'll be actually going back in and redoing some additional work on Santorini, which is the bypass road. The bypass will be taken out, and then the permanent Santorini Street, they've got some work that they've got to do in there now that it's no longer going to be heavily traveled like it has been. And so they're just making really good progress there. They're going to be turning over. So immediately east of the property is where the townhomes are going in. And I saw in an email that the developer shared with me that they were ready to turn over those lots to the builder who's going to build the townhomes, which it appears, based on what I read, it will be the same builder who's doing the homes right there. So DR Horton. And so, which probably means there's some real consistency in architectural design between them. It'll keep that there's only one builder out there working around us. I think the more builders you get, the more trades you have, and they'll utilize a lot of their subcontractors and the land that they have for all of their home sites to stage and do their work. I just think that'll be a little bit less disruption for us, not a direct benefit, but less disruption, which will be good. So, so I think both sides is really going well. We'll actually be going to the city the latter part of this summer, once they get 27th open, all the landscaping done, and saying, okay, we want to clear this from our conditions of approval. And, so get that set up. The stuff in Redmond is primarily just going through the things that we planned. We had one new item that came up, and there was a condition on us to install a street light out there. And it just got lost in the shuffle. It got, a note was added into our documents during the final plan check stage, but it really never got identified. It got caught here at the end as we were closing out, and the city said, hey, you didn't put this light in. And so we went back, and the condition is there, it's a requirement. We just recently, as yesterday, finalized where the light would go, how we would get there. And so it'll, eventually, as we finalize what the cost is, remember, we're redoing a section of the street Cascade on the backside. Well, it's right in that area also, so we kind of paused that work so that we could incorporate and do some of the work concurrently or at the same time there. So that's a little bit of a change. It's not a huge thing, but it will likely, because we're trying to keep something tight on our authorization levels, push us right to the limit. So next month, I think I'll have a couple of those authorizations coming in where I can see, okay, we're pushing up to our limit or going to exceed it. And so we'll come back for some of those updates. On the other branches, it's really the Sun River Sewer took off and is going, and it started at the beginning of this month, but so far it's progressing well, no issues. And Robert's probably seen more than I have down there, checking up on them, but that's been moving along. And downtown Bend, we got all of our plan check comments back. There's nothing of significance or concern, pretty standard plan check comments, so the team addressed them. Resubmitted, we're in second plan review now, and Kirby is using that set of documents to generate and develop their GMP. That'll be actually the large request in June. Is they expect to have final pricing to be able to come for authorization of that GMP, and it's something, you know, the size is in that $16.5 to $17 million range is right where we got it budgeted. And so that'll be the last real big authorization. There'll be some more with furniture and stuff, but the last big individual one. So we'll talk about that in June. So those are all like in progress, moving along. And outside of that, I don't think there's a whole lot else, unless there's any questions that you guys have.
Well, I think once before you said that, at least I heard they had pre-ordered a lot of things, so they weren't worried about delivery or tariffs. And is that still holding, and will it hold with the FF&E type things? If anybody's holding up, waiting to see.
So far with Central, with Kirby, there hasn't been any issues around the tariffs impacting cost or delivery so far. I think we're always tracking and dealing with things that are late on delivery. We had a couple mechanical pieces of equipment where they couldn't get the motors for the fan units. And so it delayed the manufacture of those units and then the delivery. It's since gotten resolved, but it had us all talking and nervous about what's the impact going to be. On the FF&E side, so a lot of our stuff, so like our shelving systems, we got all under contract before. All of our early learning, and none of them are having any impacts. Our furniture, because we just ordered it, and as we were looking at it, so far we pushed out the first, we had the cooperative agreements that we buy that furniture, so we have multiple contracts. and our vendor recommend, hey, let's get this batch done first because it's the most subject to the tariffs. Because some of it is coming either parts or complete components out of China. And so there was a concern there that we would see some increases in cost because of the tariffs on China. And we saw a little bit on it as we got final pricing locked up in there. It's fitting within the authorization limit, but not hugely significant. It ended up being more where they were in the 3 to 5% impact of the overall cost. Because sometimes the tariff, it sounds really big, but it may only affect a small component or a piece, and therefore it on the sale price that we pay, we see much smaller. And that's what we saw. And to date, those are the only ones. I think with the GMP pricing, they're gonna base it on what's happening today. So any tariffs that are in effect that are affecting the pricing that the material suppliers are gonna be in there. So, you know, a couple months ago, we boosted the budget, like an extra 600,000 because of this reason, anticipating that we're gonna see a rise in costs from subcontractors at bid time, because of some of that trickle down effect of the tariffs. So the good side is that we're in the bid stage. And when you're bidding and people are competing for work and people, the sub-community wants work right now out there. They're looking for work to keep busy. They all look at both the suppliers and the contractors. Okay, how much do we pass on? And that's true. Some say, hey, I would rather get the work at 1%, 2% lower than I would have in order to have the work, and I'll keep my bid sharp. Different projects we've been bidding have been, the bidding activity's been really pretty high with good bid coverage. So I think that will help dampen a little bit of that. So we'll capture everything that's known as of this current period. The bids come in here actually like next week, subcontract bid, so.
On the streetlight for Redmond, that's on the north end of the parking lot. I know we had issues with bird migration earlier. Is there any concerns about night light impacting that? And then that is a residential area on that side of the library. Are there specific designs we need to be looking at so that we're not getting complaints from the neighbors about lights shining overnight?
Yeah, it's a light where, because it's a city street light, it's, the city is actually took the lead on, saying that this is what we need to do, because
They get the.
they also get I think what drove this was, the complaints from the local people of really dark intersection. And that was, so that safety and security of drivers and potential accidents and also pedestrians walking across, drove why we're doing this. The light level that comes out of that light, is allowed to go much more broadly, right? Street lights.
Yeah.
So I don't think that'll come back to the library as a responsibility, as because the city's saying, here's where we want it, this is the height, this is the type of luminaire and how much it's gonna, that between them and Pacific Power. Yes, so it should, what they did was they put the obligation to put the light in on the library to spend their money to do this improvement. It's another one of the ways that cities get others to pay for stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this is where we're having to redo the exit.
Yeah.
Right.
It's back on that.
Yeah.
It's across the street, it's not on our property.
Yeah.
It's across the street.
It's actually
Wow.
on the corner by a county building, and we're doing some coordination with the county about that.
And surprisingly, there's a number of commercial buildings or businesses in those buildings
Yeah.
that sometimes look like residential.
It's kind of an interesting.
I didn't realize the county was there.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
parole office.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions for Greg?
Sounds like good news, progress is being made. Thank you. No, year-to-date financials.
All right. I,
Share anything?
no, if you want to confirm that all board members have a financial. quarterly
Yes.
financial.
Yes. Yes.
So I am going to try to keep this to that 10 minutes on the agenda and keep things on track for us.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased to present our Q3 financials. Q3 is usually a good chance to get that last look before we head into the end of the fiscal year, see how things are trending, and make a determination about whether or not a supplemental budget is necessary in order to maintain within appropriations level. So I'll start with the headline of this report, which is that things are on track for both to be fully resourced, or as close to fully resourced as possible on all funds. And that in that general operating fund where we did have at the start of the year, some potential elevated concerns about our appropriation level for materials and services because of reclassification that came out of last year's audit. It looks like things are on track for us to stay well below appropriation and track with expenditures coming in lower than what was budgeted in the 24-25 fiscal year. So that's the upfront. Now let's take a look at the particulars for Q3. When we look at the cash reconciliation report, just a couple of highlights here, thinking about those first 4 lines, checking, merchant account, cash, petty cash, and then the government investment pool as kind of our cash on hand for general operating expenditures. So we're sitting at a total of about 10.7 or 10.75 million cash on hand heading into the end of the fiscal year in that final quarter, which is a good, healthy cash position. The remainder of general operating fund balance is sitting in those investment portfolio accounts that we maintain through Cushing. And we'll talk about that in the investment portion of the report. The other element of that safekeeping account is it's about 82 million of that 96 million in this report is the investments of our bond fund. So the remainder of that portfolio that we have invested in US Bank, that safekeeping account. And then about 14 million is the general fund investments through Cushing. The next couple are cash on hand for construction projects and the retainage set aside and held in reserve for Kirby-Nagelhout for the Redmond and Central Library projects. Redmond is starting to draw down as we're nearing completion. We've started to release some retainage on certain trades that have been verified with Red Point that, yeah, that's good to release retainage, all work completed. And so we're seeing a drawdown for Redmond, but at the same time, we're seeing Central in full production of the construction project, which means overall on balance, we're seeing that retainage account growing if you compare it to last quarter's financials. The debt service pool is, this is where you see it come to its highest extent because we're gearing up for the next payment. And as a reminder, the June 1st payment is a combination of both interest and principal. That's our annual principal payment. And so we'll see this as the high water mark, and then in Q4, we'll see it dropped down because we made payments, or we made a payment at the end of May for that June 1st debt servicing. A couple other things to mention. I always raise my eyebrows a little bit when I see prepaid expenses and accounts payable so high, and then I remind myself that we're in the middle of a construction project, so like the vast majority of these millions in prepaids and accounts payable are related to the bond projects. Prepaid expenses include things like multi-year insurance on the projects. They include deposits we put on fixtures and furniture and equipment and shelving and all of those things. The accounts payable includes that same retainage account is balanced against a payable to the contractor. It sits in that 7 million of accounts payable. Plus, the accounts payable is very high because it includes a bunch of the invoices, say from Kirby or from other vendors on the construction project that are posting to the end of March for March construction, but they clear in April. And so you see these like big spikes at the end of each month, and then they drop as soon as the checks are cut for the construction projects. Anyway, it's always my chance to do a gut check for some strange numbers and see, okay, they're strange, but are they explainable? I feel all of them are explainable in this cash reconciliation report. And then just in general, we're continuing to see that modified accrual count, fund balance draw down each quarter as expected, because we're spending money through the construction project. And so that's essentially a representation of cash that was planned to go out each quarter to cover the construction projects, as well as general operation of the library. Okay, so if we look at the financial highlights, this is our summary statement of the back pages of this report, which have the details in terms of the numbers. First thing to say is that 3/4 of the year through the year, we're sitting at about 95% resourced. As you know, the majority of those tax sheets land around November, so it's not a steady increase month over month. That said, based on the kind of historical trends, there are always once a quarter some other sizable tax receipts that come in. And it looks, based on estimates, that we're on track to come in close to 100% resource. It'll probably be like 99% of total resource. And as far as expenditures go, we're, as I mentioned, on track to expend well less than 100% of appropriations. So if we look at the breakdown of the major categories of expenditures, we have benefits, salary, wages, all the personnel services. Right now, we are we've expended 2/3 of our budget at the 75% mark, and that is a category that does tend to run at a monthly level. It may increase month over month, but you don't get these big spikes and dips. So in terms of overall runway, we have plenty of additional in reserve or margin for error on personnel side of expenses, and materials and services too are running a little bit higher, but still not above that overall 75%. The reason they're running closer to like 69% is, as a reminder, as I mentioned, when we came out of that last year's audit, had worked with bond counsel to get a clearer sense of what was an appropriate use of bond proceeds and what really wasn't. We determined that things like moving expenses and the rent on the Redmond Design Center really needed to be covered out of general operating fund. But that determination was made after budget was approved. So we said, all right, we're going to monitor it quarter by quarter and make sure that we don't need a supplemental budget to account for this additional information that came in after the budget was approved. It turns out that things are still tracking. We're underrunning in the other expenditures in materials and services enough to account for this unaccounted amount of expense. A couple things to highlight. Insurance did come in higher than anticipated because the annual premium for 2025 was higher. Now, a couple things are driving that higher premium. One is just like when you put in a claim on your homeowner's insurance, and then the next year you see that go up and you say, wait a minute, why did my premium go up? And then they remind you that you put in a claim. We put in a claim for sisters. And I had to be reminded of that when we ran over the binder, like, wait a minute, why is property so much higher? Yeah. So when you put in a claim, they factor that into your rates. And rates did go up because of the pipe burst claim that we put in. That said, I mean, in terms of when you balance it out, the premium still is outweighed by both our ability to get things up and running and the overall coverage of that expenditure. The other reason it went up is because as a percentage of like square footage and property, like we've increased the square footage of the district by opening Redmond. And so when we did that, they kind of recalculated the rates for Redmond. Property insurance for that went up, both because of the size of the building and also because of the replacement cost, right? If heaven forbid, something happened that just leveled Redmond to the ground and we wanted to build it from scratch again, that replacement cost is based off of the price that we just spent to do it. So that's going to drive that insurance up.
Right.
So that's the first big one. The other one is non-employee labor is running very high. Again, as a reminder, that's to cover, that expenditure category is covering, the moving costs of moving things into and out of temporary locations and into the new libraries. That is coming out of general operating fund, but was not budgeted to come out of there. So as an actual to budget comparison, the actual is coming in way higher. We've accounted for that in the new budget, and we'll talk about that shortly. Same thing for rent. So rent's coming high because it's also covering Redmond Design Center. We have 6 more months left in the next year's budget, and you'll see that reflected in the budget for that as well. And then vehicles are coming in high, but that is really due to high use of the district vehicles. And so we've adjusted that in the next year's budget, but we're seeing a lot of use for outreach. We're also seeing a lot of use for going to and from construction projects for various support. You know, every time we want to get more pictures on the site or, you know, develop other communication around the new buildings, it's really best use is to load things up into a district vehicle and get it up there. And that comes at a higher fuel cost on the district vehicles. So we bumped that up as well in anticipation of more activity. Even though it's local, there's gonna be a lot of activity heading towards central, a lot of activity back and forth between central and downtown, and continued to other buildings in the district as well. So that's the operating fund. Another reminder, in capital outlay, that category now includes the physical books that are in our collection. And so right now we're sitting at about 52% of budget expended. And we're looking, you know, as we head into that last quarter, we are seeing an increase there as we're bringing in new collections. Bonnie had mentioned that she was reviewing the consent agenda and the monthly disbursements. She's like, man, there's a lot of Baker and Taylor. Oh, all of those are actually coming out of this capital outlay. Those are collections that we're putting into our libraries to keep things fresh. And then for IT, obviously, there are more planned purchases of equipment as we head into the final few months of the year. The remaining funds, everything tracking well. Reserve fund, really no new activity. We're just continuing to accrue interest relative to the balance on that account. Grant funds, we did receive our ready to read funding for 2025. So we got that in January, kind of a month before all of the announcements about some changes in federal grant structures and trickle down effects to states. But we did receive full funding for Ready to Read 2025. Ready to Read 2024 is fully expended at this point. It fully expended at the end of December. And so everything you see in the detail report for Q3 in terms of remaining balance is remaining balance for that one grant fund of Ready to Read 2025. Capital projects, as we mentioned, you know, the only new resource coming in is the last 3 months of interest and gains on investments. But we're 99% resourced, so we think we'll end the year close to or at full resource on capital projects, and expenditures is continuing to track along over there. So we've come up based on Greg's estimates of cash flow, our best estimate of where we think we will end the year, and that's built into the budget you'll see for the upcoming fiscal year for capital funds or for capital projects. And then finally, debt service. So debt service, again, we're continuing to receive tax receipts for that. So we are on track to be fully resourced enough to both cover the upcoming interest and principal payment, and also to have the majority of the resource we need to cover the next interest payment in December. And then we'll receive that November tax receipt and be in the process of it. Okay, so we'll round up on the investment report.
Before we do that, because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just check and see, are there any specific questions around the investment report or anything else for Robert before we wrap up? Sorry to
Okay,
cut you
no,
off.
that's quite all right. I'm seeing clock on my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions for Robert? Well, we don't need to take action.
No, it's
Okay.
informed.
I'm going to adjourn I'm going to take a temporary adjournment for the budget committee meeting and we will resume the regular board meeting after the budget meeting concludes. Okay, I would like to call, the meeting into session for the budget committee meeting. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you all. Like, some of you, we only get to see you once a year, and it's like old Holcomb. So thank you all for your service and welcome. And the first thing that we have to take care of is we have to do a roll call. So Todd, I will ask you to call the roll.
Okay. First of all, Ann Ness is not here. Betsy Tucker,
Hi.
Bunny Thompson,
Here.
Ann Malkin,
Here.
Aaron Trimble, Erica Scapel,
Here.
Lynn Keith, Pat Minnie,
Proceed.
Ashley Carson.
Here.
And Dan Quick, here, okay.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome, everybody, and especially Lynn, and hopefully this will make sense to you as we go along, and if not, say. You can ask questions. Our first order of business is to elect a budget chair, and I know that this is sometimes dealt with, brings up much trepidation. But Todd does most of the heavy lifting and you will have lots of help. So would anyone particularly existing, but people that have been on the budget committee before, would anyone like to volunteer?
And also any of the board members could do as well.
Oh, okay.
We can even nominate Ann Malkin.
I was just gonna say, I'm nominating.
Oh.
Yeah.
Got that already.
We're hearing your nominations. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay,
Thank you for your service.
well, I'm happy to. This is how I got involved with library service years and years ago, so, but now I can't remember what I'm supposed to do. So first of all, do we have any members of the public attending either in person or online who would like to make comments before the budget committee?
Is there anything in the chat? Okay.
Okay, hearing none, we will close the public comment section of the meeting. And now we'll turn to Todd for his presentation of his budget message.
Okay. I was just telling Erica, I get deep into this budget for 3 months and then we published this about 3 weeks ago and I forget everything. So this will be a good test for me. Start off with the 25-26 budget, a very exciting year for us. We opened the new Redmond Library just a couple of months ago. And that has just been amazing. Hopefully, many of you had a chance to see it. It is a little overwhelming in how popular it is. When we had the grand opening, I think we had close to 2,000 people. We actually aren't totally sure because so many people came in at the same time that our counters didn't get everybody. But we have a great video of people flooding into the building. And that is really, we'll talk a little bit about, that's a lot of the work we've been doing. We've been talking about in past budgets about upcoming bond projects and what will be happening. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to jump into, by the way, we also opened the Sun River less than a year ago. Also another amazing space for us. So some big things coming up in the budget. I just talked about the bond projects. A big piece that we're doing right now is our next big project is the Central Library. And that will be opening in May of 2026. And it's always finding for me I put this picture in 3 weeks ago and it already looks completely different. I was just up on the roof yesterday. The solar power, cells are going in, all this area has been glassed in. 27th is about to open in a couple of weeks, and so people will really have an opportunity to drive by this building, because this side of the building, which nobody sees right now because they're all routed over here, will be the most complete looking part of the building. They've put in the stone facade on the bottom part. It looks beautiful. So very exciting piece coming up for us this year. So that's why I want to highlight a big piece of the budget, $65 million towards our projects, especially that project. Once we open that building in May of next year, we'll immediately transition into remodeling the downtown Bend Library. And so that is also going to be a big part of this budget, at least a couple of months worth as we start doing that. And then the next piece here is about commitment to service. And if you remember from last year's budget, we had a really big increase in staffing. We were getting ready for opening up the Redmond Library, and we were getting ourselves set up for becoming a much larger library system. And we did a lot of work around how are we reimagining our organization, how are we setting up our management structure. And so we hired about 12 different positions last year. In this budget, you're gonna see is significantly different, because I'm really treating this as kind of a pause year for us. A lot of this year is us getting ready to make a big move over to the central library. And it'll be significant for us. It means moving all of our East Bend staff, moving all of our downtown Bend staff, and moving all of our administrative staff that work in this building, all kind of at the same time. There will be some downtime between basically December and May, where we will be lowering down the amount of service we have in downtown Bend as we get ready to start moving things. Our goal is to keep services as open as possible for the citizens of Bend during this whole transition, but it may look at some periods where we're down to some lobby service where you can come and pick up holds. And then we'll be transitioning that over to a lobby service over at the new library, which also has a drive-up window. And so in there should be minimal interruption, but it won't be the full library service that we all come to expect. And unfortunately, each of our communities has experienced that. Redmond was in a temporary space for over a year. Sisters Lapine and Sun Rivers were in a little tiny trailer while we moved. So this will be similar to us. So part of that is not putting a lot of effort in staffing, because we will have a lot of staff that don't have anywhere to go. So we don't want to do a bunch of hiring and then have people sit around or say, now I have nowhere for you to work. And we'll look at this next year. Next year's budget will be another significant increase for us, because then basically all the staff we have moving over to Central is adequate staff to run that building. And then once downtown Bend's done, we can consider it an empty building. Some of the staff, yes, will come back, but really we have to hire all the staff to run that building. And so that will be another increase in our funding, and we're going to look at that as we look through our 3-year projections and what that looks like for us. And I'll talk a bit of that too. I'm being conservative in that too, because once we do that, we have over the last 7 years, we have been increasing our general fund, getting ready for these days. And we are now at the peak of how much money we have in our general fund. When we get in there, it's can't remember where it is now. It's getting close to 19 million. Yeah, about 18 million this year. And then we are starting to go down. Our goal has never been to have that much money sitting in our general fund, because we feel like we should take the money that the taxpayers are giving us to give them services. But we needed to build up that kind of extra money so that we could start hiring people, start adding services. So the challenge for us is we don't want that downward slope to go so fast that we're out of money in 3 years. So this year, this pause year is also a chance for us to say, we're a little worried about how steep that decline is coming up. There are many things we can do to adjust that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that's going to look like for us. I'll say right now, the only hiring that I have suggested in here is an operations manager for us in the district. That's a need we have. That's an area where we're currently really putting a stress on our staff, especially with the number of staff we've hired. What this means for us, though, is I've actually stopped most hiring right now, starting at about March. And there's some significant positions that we're not filling. And that's really just to give us a chance to see where are we and how can we kind of slow that spending down a little bit. We do have a lot of options for us if we start shifting how we're doing services, and that's a lot of what we're going to do over the next year as we start looking at that. Right now, I'd say the biggest thing, if you asked about one thing that I am concerned about, with the new Redmond Library, it's our first makerspace, and it has been incredibly popular. Way more popular than we expected. And that's a great dilemma for us, but it's also a challenge. And we need more staffing resources in that area. And right now, I don't have a solid solution for that. I would love to have had that staffing in here to figure that out. So that's a big piece of what we're going to be looking at over the next year is what kinds of things can we do to shift so that we can not only staff that for Redmond, but when we open the central library, we'll have 2 maker spaces there. And when we open downtown Bend, we'll have a maker space there. Very nice to know that that is a space that we put in directly from talking to over 7,000 people across the county about what they wanted in their libraries. And makerspace was one of them, interactive children's spaces, and the co-working spaces. And I would say, to be honest with you, makerspace, I wasn't sure how that would go. It's obviously wildly successful. I'm happy to see that my thoughts on where it might go were a little bit off. Co-working space, I thought was a really neat idea, but I wasn't sure how people would use it. And it has been wildly popular in Redmond. And we will be having that at the Central Library and the Downtown Library as well. The neat thing about the co-working space is that doesn't take up much staffing at all. The people are self-regulating. They sit there quietly and do their work, which is great. We actually thought people might get into arguments about who gets a spot where, and people really just enjoy that as a quiet space to sit and work. So most of the increase in the staffing comes with this one regional manager position, and actually the majority of it is just cost of living increases. And that's where we're kind of keeping that in line. So we'll take a look a little deeper into that. Highlight for you this budget process, the way we do things here. We are a separate government organization. We're a special district. We have an elected board. Our elected board sets results policies, outcomes that they would like to see happen for our end users. And every November, December, they get together and actually prioritize where they would like to see more effort, less effort. And that's where we start as a management staff and the library staff to start saying, okay, what can we do to meet those goals? And I work with all of our staff to gather their input, their ideas, also have to balance out where we are with our funding. And then the last piece is we bring this to you all for review. And we're at that point right now. As a budget committee, your job here today is to receive and review this document, hear the message, which you're doing right now. Hear any public comment, which we did not have any. And request and receive additional information as needed. So there is no requirement for you to pass this proposed budget today. If you feel that you need more time or more meetings to get more information, we can do that. And the last piece, once you do approve the proposed budget, it will then go, you'll also approve the budget and the property tax rate. We get $1,000. We get $1,000. We get 50. We get, I already forgot, 55 cents. I've said it for 26 years and I forgot. 55 cents for $1,000 assessed value. So if you had a $100,000 house, you're paying $55 a year towards the library. And that you actually have the ability to say, actually, we think it should be 50 cents this year. You can't go above 55, but you can go below. As you will see, I do not recommend that you do that. That will wreak havoc on us. But then the next thing, once this is approved, the last piece is that approved budget goes to the library board at their next board meeting for adoption. And that's when it officially becomes a budget. The library board cannot change significantly anything that you decide here today. They can't change more than 10% in any major category without reconvening. Okay. I'm going to jump through to some budget assumptions. We are using the 4.7% estimate from the county assessor on where they feel property taxes will go this year. Our property taxes are based on the value of all the property in Deschutes County in January of this year, January 2025. But the county assessor takes until October to sit and calculate what all that will be. So we don't actually know the exact amount of money that we should be getting until October. So we have to do an estimate. And I will say when we go and look at where I'm looking forward at future years, I have based kind of our estimates going forward in future years at 4.5%. And this is a good one Dan caught today. I said personnel costs here are going up by 3.15%. That's actually staffing costs. I did not include in here benefits. With benefits, it's a little over 5% because they're going up at a higher rate. And the reason I'm highlighting what you said, Dan, is I've had that exact same statement in here for 16 years and nobody's ever caught that I've been saying the wrong thing, which is this is really staffing costs. So I get to change that for next year. I think I'm proud of you for doing that. Let's see. What else do we have? And then in the future years, you'll see when I'm predicting in future years, it's going up 17% in the next year because of that additional staffing for downtown Bend. And then personnel costs, we didn't add anybody, it would go up by about 6%. That's a combination of cost of living and step increases for staff. A big piece of our benefits is our PERS, Public Employee Retirement System, and the rate for that has gone up a couple of percentages from last year. It's now 25.88 for tier 1 and tier 2 and 23.28 for the rest of our staff. Let's see. So this is kind of that projection we do from what we get from the county assessor. This is how much the property value was worth in Deschutes County last year. We're expecting to go up 4.7%. And that's the 55 cents per 1,000 that we get. And so that's how much we expect to get, but we also know not everybody pays their taxes. We are using a 97%. And based on that, there are some variations. We are studying what we've been getting in the last couple of years and this year, and we are averaging close to 97%. It does vary. That's, I think, Dan, you were saying the city is using
96.
90s. Oh, okay.
It's close.
Yeah, I will say I'm not as worried about that this year because we're at such a high level that 1 or 2% is not going to affect us. If we were a much tighter budget, I'd be much more worried about how close we are to these.
Well, and our historicals do show between 96 and 98% collection rate.
Yeah. Okay, now we're gonna look at this 3-year projection. This is a big piece of the budget. One big thing that our board does set is that we must have a minimum of 17% carried forward based on our expenditures. For us, that would be $3.7 million. And as I said, we're at a very high point right now. This is actually projecting that we'll have an ending balance of over 16 million, which is much higher than the 3 million. So we're in good shape there at this point. And let's see if I can get. I'm not gonna be able to get all of it in here, but I'm gonna start with this. So a couple of things that you see in here. This chart is a really big piece for you to look at. How stable are we? What does this look like? In it, we have, here's what we had budgeted last year. Here's where we expect we're estimating our expenditures are going currently. And then this is going to be the area, this is actually the big piece that you're voting on today is this amount. That's what we're proposing that we'll be getting in funds and actually in spending. And then these next 2 years are really kind of for your information. Because if we stopped here, you would look and say, oh, we have $16 million, we're in great shape, go ahead. But what you really want to know is, well, what does that mean 2 years from now? And so this is the piece that I was talking about where we're starting to get concerned about how fast this is going down. And a big piece of that, because over 60% of our spending is on staffing, and that's going to go up a lot next year. And so that's where I will be looking at kind of finding a way to slow that down a little bit as we get in here. We actually, if you have a chance to see Robert's kind of long range projection, really that's what we're looking at is trying to get us to a point out there in the future, about 5 or 6 years from now, where we kind of stabilize and then we have some decisions to make about if we really want to increase services, increase staffing. We're going to have to look for some other ways to get funding, and that could be in the form of an operation levy. It could be some adjustment to our services. The good news is we're in really good shape right now, but this is always one to be cautious on. I will also point out, I've gone back through, so this is my 16th budget. Every single one of them, I have predicted kind of a dire situation in 2 years, which I go to the most conservative extreme, where I'm saying we get the least amount of funds going forward and we're spending the maximum. And every time we've really been much higher than that number. So that gives me some more, I actually feel much better about this number than it looks. But I will say we're definitely going to be going on a trend where it's just going, especially if you've been saving this much money for that many years, it's scary to start spending. So some highlights in here. And just, so when we talk about 97% of the people paying their taxes, they will pay eventually. And that's where this previously levied taxes are expected to come in. We're expecting to start off the year at $18.7 million. And so far, kind of, we were just looking at our third quarter budget numbers and we're looking pretty close to that. You'll see personnel is much lower than it was. A couple of things happened there. I actually, we had some vacant positions that I did not fill, especially starting in March when we were looking at these numbers, going down a little steeper than we wanted. So we really wanted to make sure that we didn't overcommit ourselves in staffing. Before we got to a point where we need to make sure that we can do the services we do. And this really is for us a big pause year. In many ways, kind of shifting the way we're doing services. For our staff, we'll be spending a lot of time sitting and thinking, how do we box up stuff and move it? And what stuff do we get rid of? And what's my life gonna be like when I'm living in a different spot? Let's see, interest. Interest has gone down because interest rates have gone down. It was fun for us for a while when they were really high. The good news is, as we just looked at in our third quarter projections, Robert's done a great job of investing a lot of our kind of reserve funds into bonds, into other, used to just sit in government, LGIP, which is local government investment pool, which has a pretty good rate of return. But we're getting a nice rate of return with these bonds, which is nice. That's definitely, if you went back about 10 years ago to look at this number, it would have been about $30,000 or something. So, fines and fees, we're expecting to go down, dip this year, mainly because we're gonna have limited services in Bend, where we're not going to be having as much activity. I do have that predicted to go up in the future. Interest, by the way, this is where you see my conservatism. I obviously have no idea what interest rates are gonna be in 2 years. So I'm predicting kind of a worst case scenario, that a couple of things.
It
We'll have
decreases
less
also
money.
because your balance is decreasing,
Yes.
so you have
We'll
less
have-
money to earn.
We'll have less money and we don't know what the interest rates will be, so but that's definitely a big piece of that. Kind of donations is never really a big piece for us. We really encourage people when they make donations to donate to the Deschutes Public Library Foundation. But on occasion, somebody randomly writes a check and sends it to us. So we do budget for that, but it's not something that we have a lot of control over where that goes. Most of the miscellaneous is actually working with our foundation. We have a staffing position that we share with the foundation. The library covers their salary and the foundation gives us funding to help with that, and that's where that comes from. And then this is an interesting one, charges for services. I really should change that title because it's very misleading. All of this is based on our partnership with Crook County Library and Jefferson County Library. And we share a catalog with them. And so they give us money to help pay for their portion of the library catalog. They also give us money to help with the courier system that brings books around. And for many years, they were part of our digital book collection. And they decided to go with a statewide collection that, so they're not part of that anymore. So that's where their funding is going to drop. And most of this was just a pass through. We didn't really make any money off them, but we just kind of passed through our expenses based on what they incurred. It is still somewhat high this year because they are buying a new catalog database for themselves. And again, this is a pass through. Once they're done with that, their costs will be much lower because they're not really spending that much with us. The law library, the law library is actually by statute run by Deschutes County. And Deschutes County contracts out with us to run the law library for them, which has been a really great service both for them and us. As they said to me when they started, we're not in the library business and we don't really want to be. And we were able to take that collection and really expand the services. Before you had to go, you had 20 hours a week to go to county headquarters and get in to use their services, and there weren't many services. Now our collection is available across the county. And we had some very innovative databases that we were able to add. Where people, for example, in LaPine can go and research their court records where before they had to come into Bend and research them. So that is kind of set by a couple of things, how much money the county gets for law library service that comes through court fees. And so we don't have a lot of control over this, but we work with them. We did raise this about 30,000 last year. Based on the amount of services we're doing and our costs going up. So right now I have this predicted kind of going straight forward, but we'll see where that goes. We kind of negotiate that every year. Let's see. And then tax income from current year taxes. Again, we just looked at this as that chart we looked at before. This is what I'm estimating as getting. I have it predicted to go up about 4.5% over the next couple of years. That is lower than in the past. I would use about 5%. But it does look like, based on talking to the county assessor, it looks like that's more in line with expectation going forward. Then let's go into expenses. So just talked about staffing where I'm keeping it relatively stable compared to the previous year. And we talked about going up a lot next year with the downtown Bend. Benefits is going up at a higher rate than our staffing, just because cost of insurance, I think it just went up 9%.
9%, yeah.
PERS has gone up a couple of more percentages. That's always a challenge for us. It just, you're probably all familiar with that. Healthcare costs and other benefits just go up at a much higher rate. Materials and services, we've kept fairly low going forward. There is a significant piece. There was a hard hit for us that we made a decision on. You may have seen our Hoopla service. That is, if you've used Libby to check out digital books, we also had a service called Hoopla that had digital books, it had some graphic novels, all online, and some movies. And that went where when we first started using it, I think, I'm gonna make up a number, but I think it was around 50,000 a year. It's risen up to about 600,000 a year for us in costs, because it's one service that every time somebody checked out a book, the company would charge us. And so as it got more popular, that would happen. And so that was a really tough one for us. What we saw when we looked at the numbers is we had a very small percentage of our population actually using it. And so kind of outweighing how much we're spending per person on that service. It was a cool service, and it's been tough. The libraries across the country are kind of dropping them because it's just getting out of hand. With the Libby services, it's different. We purchased access to the books, and let's say we pay $30 for that book, and you all check it out just like a physical book. I could have one person check it out, or I could have 30 people check it out over the year, and that's the same cost for us. With Hoopla, if you all checked it out, we would be paying for it 30 times. So anyway, that's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest kind of reduction we did make in our materials and services to try to balance that out. Other than that, some of the reasons that, and you'll see it's going up in the next few years. Some of the materials and services, for example, with the new central library, a lot of the things we purchased in this year will be purchased with bond funds. By the way, this is just our general fund. I should have said that at the beginning. So this doesn't include any bond funds. Let's see. Transfer to capital projects reserve. What am I looking at? Oh yeah, I'm trying to do this line now. That was material reserve. Okay. So we'll talk about our reserve fund. I'm going to show you that. But basically our reserve fund is used for any future building repairs, or if we were going to do an addition on this library and it's not part of the bonds, we would have to do it through our reserve fund. Right now, we have about $2 million in our reserve fund. We have all brand new buildings. We're in really good shape. So I'm not suggesting that we add to that at this time. And that's something we need to watch as we move forward. I am also, the board and this committee did budget to add $100,000 to the reserve fund this year. We have not made that transfer yet. I'm actually suggesting to our board that we not make that transfer because I think we're in strong shape there. So we'll take a look at where we are with that. Capital outlay. Again, this is one that should be going up because of the because of our buildings are expanding, but again, a lot of that is around the bond funds. Also, kind of a new one that we looked at last year, books are now capital, which was a really interesting accounting decision that came out. And in the past, we treated it as a material and service because it's a $20 book that you may use, read, and destroy within a year. And there was the accounting officials up high in the state had looked and said, no, that's a capital asset. So that is where, if we went back in past years, we've gone up a lot in capital outlay, and a lot of that's because of our book collection. And let's see, contingency, we are recommending a $300,000 contingency to help cover us in case there any emergency spending that we may need to do. This is one that, and you'll see we don't project it in the forward because if we do spend it, we have to replace it. And then we would put it in the next year's budget. And I realized a long time ago, if I project it forward, it looks like we're spending $900,000 when we never do that. I will point out that in the last 26 years, we have used our contingency once. And that was in 2007, we used $60,000 towards the Sisters Library construction. And so that gets us to our total appropriations of 21 million. Again, we talked about needing to have that 3% or 17%. We're well above that. And so that's where we're looking at with our projections. I will pause. I should have said at the beginning, if you have any questions along the way, chime in. Yes.
Is it correct that all positions are budgeted for assumed to be filled for the full year in this year's budget and then the out
Yes.
years? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, which is, and traditionally we do underspend our personnel budget. I think you just looked up the number for that, and that was.
Well, so far this year, we're underspending by about 10%. And really a lot of that has to do with hiring, the timing of hiring.
And that happens throughout the year because we just don't know. But traditionally, it happens all the time. Somebody will win the lottery, they'll leave. It may take us a month to replace them. And so that's a piece that happens. Some of the budgeted position, this year we only have one extra position. But we may not hire them on July 1, it may happen in September, and there will be a little bit of savings in there. So that's where we don't traditionally spend that at the full amount.
I had a question, Todd. I mean, with bringing buildings online that are the size of Redmond compared to what the size of Redmond used to be, I assume that there is some amount of guesswork in how many people we are going to need, and how do you feel like that guesswork has been going as far as, are we coming close? Do we have about the number of people? You said makerspace, maybe we need more staffing there, but in general, have you been pleased with how the personnel projections have worked out over the last year?
Yes, yeah, and how for Redmond it's a 40,000 square foot building. We have a 38,000 square foot building next door, where it's easy for us to do some comparisons. Central Library would be a little bit different.
Alright.
Yeah, but I will say, and Lynn can chime in on this, she does great projections on looking through what kind of coverage we need, kind of looking at, okay, we've got 3 floors and we need 2 people on this floor, 2 people on this floor, we need a couple people down here. What's that going to look like, and projecting that out. And so feel pretty confident on where we are with those numbers.
Yeah, because it seems like it's a challenging situation as far as site distances and whether you've got corners where you need somebody back in, or at least roving so that they're back in areas that aren't as visible.
Yeah, one thing we have seen, and Redmond's a great example. The old Redmond Library you couldn't see past about 20 feet. In the new library, especially upstairs, you can stand at one end and see almost the entire area. Because the shelves are no higher than this. And that's really helped us out a lot. So that piece, and that will be the same at the central library as well.
Right, I can remember when we were looking at library designs in Dock 1 in Denmark, where they were saying it only takes, some incredibly small number of staff to cover this huge library because they had those sight lines.
Yes, it was 100,000 square feet and they could run it with 2 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I will say our staff heard that and
I'm not quite suggesting that.
they did that for a reason there, because they knew they traditionally didn't get funded, so they wanted to make sure that they could run that. That's not how we're planning on doing it, but we are aware that we don't have unlimited funding to increase staffing exponentially.
Right,
So that's an important piece for us.
right. Thank you.
Todd, if I could ask just a couple questions on the revenue side.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like there's anything here in the general fund, but I Googled one time something about Libby and I get pushed all these articles about federal funding tied to some of these library programs. Are we gonna cover that in the grant fund?
No.
Or is that somewhere else?
How's that right now?
Is that in here?
Yeah, a little bit in the grant funds, we'll talk about that, but it's a great question, because we know federal funding has been slashed for libraries and museums. The good news for us is the only federal funding that we indirectly received was what's called a Ready to Read grant that we get every year from the state, and that is funded from the federal government. And in the state of Oregon, they send it out to all libraries based on how many kids are in a county. And a lot of that's used for early learning or summer reading programs. And we get about $38,000 a year from that. And so the good news is we just got the check for this year. So we have the money, but we're definitely concerned about it next year. And that actually comes into a little bit of our budgeting here, where we increased some of our spending in the general fund just in case it disappears next year, because we can't be sure it'll be there. Kind of the real big hit in this state is going to be to smaller libraries. For example, in Eastern Oregon, I just talked about Jefferson and Crook County just left us to go. They joined with Eastern Oregon libraries. I think it's called Library to Go. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Where they all pull together to get digital books. A lot of that is funded by federal funding. And so they may lose that, which is scary. A lot of courier service for Eastern Oregon is covered by federal funding. They may lose that. The state library is heavily funded by federal funding, and they're in danger of that. Right now, temporarily, through a court injunction, the money has been restored, but anyway, so it's a good question, because we're in actually very good shape. Because the majority, 99% of our funds come from local property taxes, we're in good shape.
So on property taxes, do you feel like the 55 cents is kind of the right target? I know the city feels very constrained with our property tax, and there's a lot of lobbying going on to revisit Measure 5 and 50 that restricts at 3%. I guess, do we have that same angst about the 55 cents and the 3% cap?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, because we're just looking at, with the amount of growth we have, it's tough for us to keep up with that. Right now, it's 4.5% growth in property taxes. Depending on what the cost of living is, the maximum amount that, we could give to our staff is negotiated. It's 3 to 5%. So if it's at 5%, we're actually going down in services. So this year, actually, the cost of living is 3%, which is, means we've got a comfortable margin. But it's such a razor thin margin for us, that it's hard for us to really add services. Usually in any given year, we kind of have that ability to maybe add a position. And so that's going to be a tough piece for us as we go forward. And Redmond's a good example of, we've built that library and it's incredibly popular. But with that popularity comes that pressure of how do we serve? And 55 cents is very low for libraries in Oregon. The city has their famous dollar bill that they publish that shows where your tax money is going. And we're not even on there. We're like a sliver with an arrow towards other things, including libraries. So yeah, a good example in Multnomah County, they get $1.19 per $1,000 assessed value. And I remember I was talking to the director of Multnomah before they got that measure passed, and she was telling me, we're in hard times because we're only getting 89 cents. And so yeah, it is a challenge for us.
Are there lobbying efforts? Is there a library association or anything that?
Well, here's the challenge for us as a special district. In order to go out and ask for more funds, we could put that on the ballot and say we would like 75 cents. If that didn't pass, that wipes out our district. And we're not willing to take that risk. So we can't just go and say we need more funds. And if we lose, we'll stay at the 55 cents. So that's a real challenge for us. So your next safe option would be an operating levy that's a two or 3 year levy. Which is great. You could add funds there, but then you have to go back out. I think the fire district just went through that. How do they have a 5-year levy?
Fire department, mhm,
Yeah.
The max.
yeah.
Yeah,
5 years.
so the maximum is 5 years. And that's a tough part. It's hard to plan, like when you're hiring staff, really saying, I can guarantee you employment for the next 3 years because our 5-year operating levy is gonna run out at that point. But that may be one for us to look at. Our kind of goal is to get out about 5 or 6 years and really assess where we are. We definitely know that this is not a good time for us to go out and ask for more money. We're right in the middle of spending a lot of money that the community just gave us for these building projects. So, thank you. Good question. Any other questions on this before I'm going to go into kind of a little bit more on where our general fund spending is? And the most popular question I've heard so far is, what is non-employee labor? Which is a great question because it jumped. If you are taking notes, it jumped a lot this year. And the reason for that is that usually what we spend this for is maybe a handyman to help us out and put together a piece of furniture for us. And we don't use that much because we have a facility staff. But this year, we're actually including the cost of moving materials, moving stuff from downtown Bend, moving stuff from here over to the new library. We can't use bond funds for that, which is interesting. Because it's stuff we already own and we're moving it, we can't use bond funds for that. If we bought all new stuff, we could. But anyway, that's why that's so high this year. It's kind of a one-time thing. Well, it may go much lower when we open we probably won't need it much at all for downtown Bend because it's gonna be all new library. So that's probably the last time you'll see that high. I will highlight election expense at 0. We only run elections every other year, and we won't be running one next year, so there's no cost there, but I keep that there because otherwise I'll forget. And we have an expensive one this year. We have 4 people running, so. Let's see. Some of the things, and I'll maybe have Robert say a little bit about it, when you're looking at our business services, that includes our facilities and finance. But a big part of that is Robert is trying to project the cost of running this new central library without having any idea of how much it's gonna cost to run a new building.
Yeah, it's our best guess for the first 6 months.
Yeah, great news that Robert's just recently seen on the Redmond Library. You wanna tell him?
Yeah,
about
well,
that?
we did a bit of analysis over the last 12 months of utility costs for Redmond Library. And as a reminder, Redmond Library does not use any fossil fuels. It's a fully electrified building. It is a net zero building. We have photovoltaic cells that are meant to offset the overall annual usage of electricity. But we still pay an electric bill. You don't get to pay a zero bill just because you've got solar panels. If you account for what we've paid in electric utility over the last 12 months in that building, because we've been operating it even before we opened to the public. We were heating and cooling it and had all the lights on and everything. We spent something like 30% less than what it takes to heat and cool and keep the lights on for an equivalently sized building in downtown Bend. So, yeah.
Some things that you might expect to see higher that aren't a lot of our IT expenses. Again, all of the equipment that we're buying for the new central library is going to be purchased through bond funds, so it is not showing up here in our general fund. And my apologies, this is a big chart that you may have many questions on, but I'm overwhelmed by the numbers now to pick out anything important. I think those were kind of some of the highlights that I had for that. Trying to think if there's anything. One interesting one for us, as we just talked about it, looking at our current financials is, Robert was saying the cost of, we've been spending a little more than we expected for the cost of our vehicles moving around, but actually that's lowering mileage.
Yes.
That we reimburse staff because they're not using their own cars. They're using our district vehicles.
Yeah, we're paying a negotiated rate on fuel for the district vehicles as well.
Yeah.
What about the makerspace supplies? Do you see, what does it cost to run that program? And is it a significant increase in materials and services?
We did increase based on that, and I think Myra was out there. She's, if you can hear me, Myra.
Hi there. Yeah.
So we increased some based on Redmond because to replace things. For the new libraries, we can actually purchase stuff with bond funds to an extent.
To an extent.
Yes.
Consumables can't be capitalized, so they'll be coming out of general operating fund. So things like the filaments in a 3D printer.
But so Myra, my question to you is, I know we added to that budget, I just can't remember where we ended up with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been able to successfully monitor the spending of Redmond over the last 3 months. It is definitely our best guess, but we have been really aggressive at checking on that. And then also on just kind of monitoring what usage looks like and the trends. And what we've found is we could create about a $10,000 annual for the Redmond or expense on supplies for Redmond, and that seems to be more than enough currently. We're going to continue tracking it because obviously we haven't gone through a full cycle of a full year. We also estimate that our busiest time is these first 90 days. We're already starting to watch it normalize, thankfully. It hasn't slowed down, but it's normalized. And then from there, we projected it to 2 makerspaces at Central and anticipating a little bit bigger and more use because it does cover a wider service population. So from there, we mapped out the 3 makerspace expense. One thing I will say, our community is super self-monitoring and super frugal. It is coming up a lot lower than what myself and our makerspace technician had anticipated. And quite the opposite, one of the high quality issues we have is folks keep wanting to give us things, which is a really nice problem to have. So I think we'll continue monitoring, but it actually is much more sustainable than I think. I think I hear a lot of commentary and questions on, this must cost a fortune. I actually think it's super realistic and sustainable. Another thing we do is also manage by policy. So for example, with our 3D printers with the filament, there will be print time limitations. And so that kind of self-monitors to ensure that more people get a chance to get in there, but somebody gets a decent quality sized print and dedicated time to their print. So I hope that answers the question, Todd.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
thank you.
And a
sure
big
thing.
piece for us, we actually talked about, should we charge up front for these? And we really felt like, let's give this away free and adjust if needed. And that's worked out really well for us so far. If at some point that it just gets out of hand, we may have to look at recouping some money with fees, but we really would like to not do that. Because we try to eliminate as many barriers as possible for people accessing us.
And what about the EV chargers? I know Sisters, it's open to the public right out front. You were monitoring those. Are we doing okay?
Yeah, so monitoring at Sisters, it looks like, again, that kind of trend of things have leveled off. When it first was there was a lot of interest, a lot of use. And now it seems to have gotten to a point where, yes, we are paying more in electricity in order to provide that service to the public. But it is not driving the utility costs for Sisters into an outrageous direction. Again, when I did the 12-month analysis of Sisters, because now they've been open for more than 12 months, and compared it to a 12-month period prior to the renovation, when you take both their fuel costs for propane heat and their electric costs for both light and heat and AC, as well as the electric vehicle chargers, we are actually spending on par or slightly less now over the most current 12-month period in order to maintain utilities in that building. And that's with the EV chargers there. I'll say in Redmond, we piloted an approach that we may try to take with the EV chargers and Sisters. And that is that what we did notice in Sisters, the biggest problem is that there's a few people that just park, they'll charge, and they will be there all day, whether they're charging or not. And then that's a service that's not rendered. And so what we did in Redmond was we basically said the first 2 hours are a free charge. And after that, it is pay for electricity in order to provide a certain nudge to just say, okay, you got 2 hours worth of charge, but now it's a community resource, time to open that up to someone else from the community and to see how that goes. And so we're looking really at that and see how that might change behavior there. With Sisters, because we share that EV charger with the city, we would have to go back to the city and come up with a mutually acceptable agreement if we wanted to try and roll something like that out there too.
Good.
And we have 2 in Redmond. Is that
Yes.
right? And we will have, I forgot how many in Central.
We will have 6 in
Yeah.
Central, very close to the entry to the building.
And what's the charging speed on those?
It is not the high level. I think it's a tier 2, so it's not like a trickle charge, but it's enough to get you that middle range, to get you from down at a 50% charge to like an 80% charge within 2 hours.
Oh,
And then you are spending a lot of time to get that last 20%, which is at that point, the community service and resource of the public, it diminishes anyway. So we wanted to make sure that we're doing that for them.
Okay.
Just real quick, the savings associated with removing hoopla, is that in collection development or is that recognized in the budget?
It is, and that because so collection development is, as I talked about, I hate to do this, it's split. It's
It is.
half of it's here and half of it's down in capital. But most of that was under, material services.
So that's ebooks, audiobooks, and print subscriptions, things that are not more than 12 months of, I'm sorry, and databases, yes. Something that's not going to last more than 12 months. And is not tangible. So that's that line. And then capital outlay as the physical books.
There, yes. Okay, any other questions on any? Yes.
Are you gonna, change or add something new to replace Hoopla, or is the other one gonna expand?
Yeah,
Maybe
that
make
part of our planning, we actually didn't cut the budget by the full amount of getting rid of Hoopla, because we left in money to purchase more books with Libby.
Yeah,
Because knowing that would increase demand.
I know Hoopla had a lot of things that Libby didn't have, so, yeah.
Mhm. Yes. Unfortunately, I got hooked on Hoopla this year, so I'm probably the one that raised the cost because it was very convenient. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm gonna jump into, so this is reserve fund we were talking about, which is currently sitting at $2.1 million. Which we feel is a really strong amount. Based on the fact that we've got some major building projects done, our buildings are in really good shape. We do have, and we're gonna be working with the board this year, talking about what are the future services going to be, because now the question is, you've got these buildings, what else are you gonna do? And a big piece that we've talked about for years that we really would like to do is expanding our ability to do some outreach through things like library kiosks. Think of a vending machine on steroids where you may have like 1,000 books, you can hold books in them, and we can put those in different spots of the community where we're able to expand our reach and allow people to have access without having to travel across town to get to some of our resources. So that would be a big piece for us. This funding would definitely be more than adequate for something like this. This would also help us out for any future needs we have. If we were looking in the future, like, is there some area that we might want to expand? Do we need to purchase some land? I will highlight that's not in this budget anywhere, is we do own land. We own 12 acres out by Roble Lane. And we own an acre on the Central Library site and we own this building, which we will have to do something with in the future. So those are also some areas that can be used in the future for the library to help out with future services.
We used this fund to buy the land on Renewal Road.
Yes.
So we were able to secure that land before we went out for the bond, and it kind of shows good faith with the voters that we're just not asking for money, we've been saving too. So it is an important fund.
The neat thing for us, that Roble Lane land we bought for $1 million. It's as soon as it gets incorporated into the city, will be worth a lot more than that, which will be a nice resource for us, either to use for future services or to sell. Yes. And by the way, this is Michelle, who is running for a board position and has facing fierce competition right now. Unopposed. Yes.
And you might have just addressed this, Todd, but are there any restrictions at all for the use of funds for the sale of those assets, the Roble land or even this land?
No, because those were all purchased through our own funds. They didn't come out of any bond funds, so there's no limitation on it. You know.
Okay.
What about the 1 acre that is at Central, and that was bond funds?
That,
We're meeting with bond counsel
Yes.
next week to ask that very question.
yes, we're trying to figure out, do we have to pay ourselves back for that? And what's the time period? If we use it or don't use it, what does that look like? So yeah, we have some questions to answer there.
Now, this is probably a super rabbit hole question. I can talk to Robert after, but that interest question that I sent you.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it seems like we have different interest rates depending
We
on the fund, and
Yeah.
this seems like a pretty low interest rate for a reserve that we're not gonna touch in a long time.
Yeah, this one is only receiving interest from LGIP.
Mhm.
And yeah, you're right, that is probably lower than where it will actually land. As an overall number, we haven't given it a ton of attention for that reason. If it comes in at 35 versus 25, then
Okay.
it just kind of does. But I will say that one reason why the interest rates look different is because they're coming from different sources.
Mhm.
So things like general operating fund is receiving some interest from a portion of that money that cash on hand in LGIP. And a portion of that money invested in 6 to 12 month or 6 to 18 month bonds, US treasuries and municipal bonds at different rates. And so we're making kind of our best guess based on maturity and coupon for some of those T-bills and all those things to take a stab in the dark where we think that'll land. But it does come in higher relative to just a straight LGIP interest.
Okay, got it. Great, thank you.
The grant funds we talked a little bit about, this is the one. Right now, the only grant that we have active is the Ready to Read grant. It's this is always a fun one because it's it covers a calendar year.
Mhm.
And we're in a fiscal year, so we just got, I always get confused by this. This one we're spending down from last year, we just got, no.
So that one is the balance forward of the money we just received. So
Right,
we got about
thank you.
$37,000 in January.
We
We
spent
figure
some.
we'll spend about 5,000 in the first 6 months as we prepare for summer. And then a lot of the expenditures for that grant land in July and August, because we do a lot of programming in the summertime paired with our summer with the library.
So this is the one that is in jeopardy. We have no idea what will happen by January of 2026, when we would normally get these funds. And that is why I've put some of that spending in our general fund budget in case it doesn't come in. To make sure that we can do the programming that we do, because this all affects kids.
So Todd, I had another question. I've been reading about and I can't remember which government program it is, but it's all related. The hotspot, the funding for loaning hotspots, does that affect us?
We're not currently using those government funds for that.
For that, okay.
Yeah,
About 4 years ago, we received an IMLS grant to help with technology, but we, ran through the term of that grant and it retired.
Okay, because I know it's a huge issue nationally, because it's federal government funds loanable hotspots for students and library users to take home.
They also fund what's called E-rate for libraries, where libraries can get internet access at a much reduced rate. And we have never partaken in that, which at this point, that's good. Mark Hovey's on the line, but he's done an amazing job negotiating internet access for us at some pretty low rates, so we've never felt the need to go to that step. And actually, I was looking at it closely this year because they were really pushing it at the state level, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because that's probably definitely in jeopardy. Yeah. Yes.
So the Ready to Read the 2026, you said that one's in jeopardy. I mean, have we been awarded it, but we don't know if those funds will?
We won't know until really about December is when, usually it used to be automatic. All the state legislature would look and say, you have 20,000 kids and you get this much money. And so we don't know. We won't know, and probably till, actually, we got the check this year in the first week of January.
Yeah. They
And
sent us an email in December though, letting us know.
yeah, until I see it in my hand, I won't believe it, based on how things have gone this year.
So is that why you don't have any expenditures budgeted? Oh, materials and services, I'm sorry.
There's a little bit, actually, there's a lot. The reality is we don't spend that much because most of this is, we spend kind of closer to this time of year. It's kind of based on cycles of how we're doing it, especially with summer reading but a lot of this we use towards outreach and early literacy programs throughout the year, so.
And you said that, you budgeted for this program in the general fund in case we don't get, so the program will continue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
For now.
in the future, that might be more difficult,
For sure.
but if you look at it, we do have a $16 million expenditure and 32,000. I always hate to say like, oh, that's nothing, because if that was my personal budget, it'd be a lot. But it's not a significant piece of what we have. I also highlight that we only budget for grants that we know that we have. So this doesn't preclude us going out, because we're always looking for grants. If we get any grants after the budget cycle, then we do a special motion with the board to accept and spend those funds. But this is the only ones we know about at this point.
Is Ready to Read, for pre-reading kids, or is it in the schools, or is it?
There's
at the
actually,
library?
good question. It's, I think it goes up to age about 12, 0 to 12.
Yeah.
We've been trying to get that increased at the state level to raise the age limit, but so far the legislature has not.
Well, I keep hearing that Head Start and all those programs are gonna be cut, so
Right.
could that be something that could really jump in and fill that gap, maybe, or
Yeah, unfortunately, it would be way too low to
way
help
too
some
low,
programs like
right?
that.
But
The grants come from the foundation, or is this just?
This grant, it comes from the state of Oregon,
Okay.
and the state of Oregon gets the funds from the federal
Okay.
government. So,
And then the foundation does do a lot of other grants, but that goes into the foundation, and then the foundation can get whatever needs to go out.
so, yeah, so if the foundation donates money to us, that comes in through donations.
Okay.
And then. So this bond capital fund is, basically, this is how much we expect to. Well, one, we have about $85 million moving forward. We do, and as you see, we're getting a significant interest on that. We got $1 million from it was a
Oregon Department of Energy.
to help with the solar power at the Central Library. So that's great. We're expecting that to come in this year. We expect to spend close to $65 million on basically the significant completion of the Central Library and beginning expenses on the downtown Bend Library. And if you've been tracking that, obviously, we started at about $224 million a few years ago, and we're getting this down. The biggest piece to highlight is our building projects are coming in all under budget. So we're in really good shape. A couple of things have really helped us out. We got the bond funds at a time, basically, we got the bond funds when interest rates were really low, and about 2 months later, they shot up. And we originally budgeted about, I think, $300,000 in interest. And over the life of the project now, we're up to close to,
Over 12 million.
yeah,
Yeah, we're averaging about 5.5% over the life of these projects in terms of interest.
yeah. I always want to say it's because of our brilliant minds, but actually sometimes luck hits you and
right.
you have the right timing. So which has been great for us, and that's, I'm sure you've all seen, agencies that have gotten bond funds and they're about to do this great project and all of a sudden they realize, oh, we have to cut a floor off this building because we can't afford it. So feeling very good about that. The majority of the equipment and what's going into the central library has already been purchased, or is on site. So we know very well that we will be in good shape for that building. Kind of the wild card for us is the downtown library, not knowing how much tariffs will hit us. But we've built in a lot of contingency into those budgets, knowing that that may happen, and we've underspent on the other projects, so we feel very confident going forward.
If you don't spend it all with the bond funds, do you get to keep what's left?
No. No, that'd be awesome. No, so that's basically that goes back to the voters in one way, shape, or form.
Do you have a rough estimate of, so did we issue all 224 million at the same time? So I guess, do you have a rough number for the downtown Bend piece of the
We
project?
do, so the downtown Bend project, the total estimated project cost is 25 million.
Okay.
And at this point, at the projected ending balance in June 30th of 26, we will be 3 to 6 months into that project's expenditures.
Gotcha.
So we feel like this is a healthy ending balance to cover both the projected costs of downtown as well as any remaining costs associated with central library or any of the other projects.
With issuing all that money up front, are you running into any issues with tax exempt status on the bond and the
Yes.
interest rate?
Every year we meet with our bond counsel. They have a financial analysis group that performs arbitrage analysis to ensure that we have a very clear understanding of what the tax liability is for that 12 million in earnings, right? We probably will not get to keep all 12 million of those earnings, which means that some of the money that's remaining in that 25 million will be set aside for a tax receipt at the end to cover the earnings on a tax-free bond. Again.
Yeah, and so the bond that passed in 2020 was a $195 million bond. At the time that we sold it, we sold the whole thing at once. Interest rates were very low and people were very interested in purchasing the bonds, so they paid 224 million for the $195 million bond.
That's awesome.
So that's where I'm saying that we're brilliant. Because we
Well,
did
there was
that.
discussion of whether or not we should stage sales like the city did. And we elected to go for it and sell them all at one time, and it really paid off.
Yes.
Yeah, we actually, because there was also discussion, do we wait a year before we sell the bonds? And we actually went back to our bond broker and said, okay, what would have happened if we had waited?
Yeah.
And he said, you would have had $60 million less if you had
Yes.
waited 12 months.
That's right.
So yeah, sometimes timing works out. Interest rates were low when we bought them, 2 months later, they went up and we started getting interest. So,
Like you said, brilliant.
Yeah, feeling good about that decision.
This debt service fund is really straightforward. This is basically how we pay back the bond. We have 2 interest payments and a principal payment every year. This is how we calculate for the county assessor how much money we need. And that's what you see on your tax records for paying back the bonds. And so it's pretty straightforward. This is basically money in to pay for the bond and money out to pay for the bond.
This is a logistical question. I don't remember from last year how we did this. At least at the city, we have to have a motion to approve the levy amount for that debt service. I don't know, is that
It's-
a requirement?
I believe it's part of the resolution that goes forward. It includes both the tax rate
Oh, yeah,
and the assessment for this.
That-
And there's
that-
a dollar amount for that.
Is that at the board level? That's not
It
the
is.
budget
I
committee?
believe so, yeah.
it is. It'll be a resolution that we pass in June that has all the funds in there, including our 55 cents tax rate and then the rate of this as well. Thank you, you scared me. for me. Okay, I'm pointing out these, so all the stuff we just looked at is also in these forms at the end. These are the required forms. Actually, the only thing I'm required to do really is have these forms for the state. But this just gives you, all of this is exactly the same as what we saw in the revenue and the general fund. The only thing I want to highlight here is this is the spot where all of our staffing is broken out by categories. Which I didn't put in that 3-year projection just because it would take up too much space. And I will highlight, I said I was conservative on the staffing. We actually budgeted for 111.4 people last year, and we're at 111.2 this year. And again, there are some positions that that we budgeted for that we just didn't fill. And didn't carry them forward this year. Yes.
Can you talk about what the new position, what that will entail, what that person will be doing?
Yeah, we have a district operations manager, that's Myra. And kind of, unfortunately, before we hired Myra, we knew that was a tough position. There's a lot to do there. And now as we've expanded these buildings, basically the operations manager oversees almost probably close to 65 to 70% of all of our staffing.
Wow.
And that's a lot for one person. They oversee all the supervisors that supervise those people, but that's a lot to put on one person. And we realized that when we did the organization reimagined. It was one of the pieces that we knew we had to take care of, especially before we start this central library. So we want to get that position in there. Because it is a lot of stress on one person.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thanks.
that's-
So
yeah.
this will be an assistant tomorrow?
No, this is actually, we haven't developed it completely, but we're looking at basically kind of splitting up duties between them. So it takes pressure off of Myra, and we can spread that among 2 people. Yes,
Thank you.
yeah. Let's see, any questions on any of the pieces here? You can see as much as possible. We try to, sometimes some of these categories shift, which might throw off, like, why did we spend so much 2 years ago and now we're spending less here, or opposite? Sometimes that's just a recategorization of certain areas. We're adding new categories. Something like, oh, I should have taken that out. Usually I have to keep it until it gets to 0. So 13N actually shouldn't be there anymore. I forgot that one. Because any of these unused categories actually need to disappear. I was keeping them because I had to keep them until they fell off the end of the map. So you can see a couple that we aren't using right now. This, again, we did talk about benefits and in that 3-year projection. This breaks it down a little bit more into what that means as far as PERS, Social Security, workman's comp, health insurance as well. Materials and services, this is just a reiteration of what we looked at before. Same for our capital outlay, transfers, reserve, contingency. And you'll see again, this is just a reiteration of the grant funds, the reserve fund, and the building project funds. I do want to go to this. So just highlight LB1 form is after you approve this budget, we're legally required to post in the newspaper record, which would be the bulletin, our LB1 form, which shows, it shows all of our spending combined. And I put it in here now, because I wanted you to, I think it's very helpful to see like, okay, I've been looking at the general fund, the reserve fund, but what does it actually mean? And this is your one spot to see like how much in total, are we spending? How much do we have? Obviously, these are greatly inflated from the normal library budget based on the bond projects. If you see that we have drastically dropped in funding over the last 2 years, don't panic. Most of that is because we've built buildings. The other highlight, I did give you all a revised LB1 because every year I forget to adjust the old, the past year's FTE staffing. So these are the actual, these two are the wrong numbers. So you have the correct numbers with you there. I will get it right some year. These are the only two numbers in this entire thing that don't automatically connect to something else. It relies on my brain.
So not to panic again, but that levy for general obligation bond down below the permanent rate levy, is that where we would typically have the amount that we're trying to levy to fund that bond?
That, we have that listed the year that we actually issued
Oh, so
the
it's just
general
initial,
obligation
okay.
bond. But we do not put that on the LB1 for ongoing.
But I'll verify it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. The good news is anything you find wrong in this, I get to correct. 'Cause they don't-
Yeah, right, yeah.
And the very last thing you see there are the results policies that the board, they kind of inspire this whole budget of what we're trying to accomplish with the funding that we have here. So that's your budget message. Any general questions from all that?
Todd, I do have a real-time correction. It does go on the LB1. And we could reference last year's for comparison.
Okay, thank you.
It does go on.
Yeah, it shows up on that line levied for general obligation bonds
Okay.
under the approved budget.
So just so you know, I put this LB1 in here every year so that you can help me.
Right,
Correct the
exactly.
correct one for the next year. Yeah. Okay, if there are no further questions, I will allow you to get to your next step. Lost.
Okay, so does anybody have any other general comments or questions for Todd after the review of this budget?
How are you feeling about getting to the end of the central library project and sleeping better? Are you, I know there's still another remodel, but.
It's a combination of, it's just seeing it physically. I was just in there Wednesday. It's pretty exciting. I had the same experience with Redmond, where I get to be in this thing that nobody knows what's coming. And I know they're gonna be amazed. And I definitely felt that in Redmond, and that's exactly what happened. So that part is really cool. And then the thing that keeps me up at night is, how do I move everybody over there? So that's our big project that we're all working on right now, is getting all the fine little details. Every time I open a closet and find a bunch of stuff that's been stored there for 20 years, that I get the hives.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get there.
Yeah. It's like moving out of a house that you've lived in forever. Yeah.
You had said that there is contingencies for the remodel downtown, because we don't know about, what's gonna happen with yours. How much of a contingency do we have?
That is a great question. That's actually in one of these.
Because, I'm just thinking from experience in building buildings and federal funding going over budget. Last night, we had a board member say that he wasn't gonna approve anything unless we had like a 50% contingency.
Well, yeah,
Which I don't think that would actually be true, but it kind of feels that way lately.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah.
So
We've
it's
got-
it's a $2.8 million contingency.
Okay.
When we originally set the budget, it was 200,000.
Okay.
So we adjusted it significantly, based on changes over the last 4 years.
And was that like a $25 million project? Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's not 50%. Yeah, and.
I think that's a little drastic, but sometimes it just, lately, I feel like it's like every month there's extra costs.
We actually right now have the bid out
Mhm.
for most of the subcontractors for the whole building, and that'll be coming in the next 2 weeks.
Mhm.
So we'll have a much better idea there, but we're feeling pretty confident on
But-
where we're at.
Well, and not
But the-
only do we have the contingency on that project, we have a contingency for the contingency.
Yes.
Right.
As well, which is pretty significant, so.
Yeah, there's
We have multiple
layers of contingencies, and I mean, we get a whole report every month on where we stand. We haven't used.
Our overall total contingency is $17 million. And we have not tapped into that in any other project. So we are actually over 50%.
Good,
Yeah.
because you want to finish the project.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
it's actually been a big concern throughout this, is that we stay on budget, because we don't want to skimp on downtown Bend, because it's beyond a remodel. I mean, all of these branches, we've gone down to the studs, and so it's like a whole new building.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to run out of money when we got to the end, for sure, because that's gonna be, people are gonna be amazed at that one too, so.
Yeah.
But we've stayed under budget
Mhm.
on everything, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, we've just had really good project planning, and everybody's worked together well, so.
That's great.
So where we are, the budget committee's job is to approve the budget and to approve the tax levy, and Todd has provided some sample motions if people would like to make a motion, and I think probably if we may do them one at a time and vote on them one at a time, that's probably less confusing than doing both. Does everybody have the suggested
I'll
language?
move, I can move.
Okay,
I move that the budget committee of the Deschutes Public Library District approves the budget for the 2025-2026 fiscal year as presented.
do you have a second?
I second.
I'll second.
Okay, all right, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we have one to set the tax rate.
I move that the budget committee of the Deschutes Public Library District approves proposed tax levy for the 2025-2026 fiscal year at the rate of 55 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation.
A second.
All right, any further discussion on that?
Oh, wait, is that Pat or Ashley? I didn't catch it.
Ashley.
Oh, Ashley, thank you.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We have a budget. Yay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, we really appreciate service on this committee, and it's great to have smart people looking over these numbers and asking good questions.
Yeah, and thank you to the board for being good stewards of the public funds.
Thank you.
With contingencies upon contingencies.
Todd is conservative, and we're all conservative, and we've got a project manager, owner's representative who's very conservative as well, so. Yeah, we wanted to make sure we spent this money wisely. So with that, I will adjourn the budget committee meeting. Here, okay. I will call the regular meeting of the Deschutes Public Library Board back into session. Okay. So we just have a few more items on the agenda. Upcoming library events, Todd, library news.
So I just wanted to talk about some things I have going on. One is Lori has scheduled for me meetings with all of our staff, we have about, 111.2. And I'll be meeting with all of them, some of them individually, some of them in groups of 3 to 5. And to really talk about what's our organizational culture, what's working well, what's not working well. And I'm really looking forward to those discussions. So out of the 111 people, I have met with 1 so far.
Yeah.
3 more meetings tomorrow, so, so great to get that kicked off. And then the next thing is,
Done that before, or do you? do
I've
that
never done
every
that
year?
before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
and I really felt like we've gotten, we've done employee engagement surveys and we get information back and we know that like we've got low scores in this area or that area. We try to do things to improve them and we don't always hit the mark. And we had some low scores last October when we looked at that. And I don't feel like we're quite hitting the mark, but I wanted to have personal discussions with people to see like, what is it? Rather than us kind of guessing it, how we do this, I really want to hear what they're experiencing.
Right.
And a big piece is I really feel like a lot of people aren't feeling heard. And this is one way to do it. The next step is, as you know, we got a letter based on our customer service model. And I will be starting work sessions with staff and I'm really broadening that out to really talk about what's working, what's not working. How can we improve? What do we keep? What do we not keep? Again, I think it's a chance to, we've got experience. We've opened some new buildings to hear how that's going and really kind of solidify what our new model would be. And it's a good timing because we really want to get this down before we open our central library. We don't want to still be in a situation of transition while we're there. So that will be coming up, probably June, July, August time frame, depending on how that works out. I really want to get these individual discussions off the ground first. Most of those will be done over the next month. Those oh, and I was just in Redmond today and it's great. I was giving a tour to Leadership Redmond and the first person asked, what are those dots in the windows? Which is awesome. They just went in yesterday. The bird safe glazing is now up in Redmond. So you may remember we had some bird tragedies last fall and we put up temporary netting and so that's now gone and we've got that bird safe glazing. And then Aaron, I just heard you talking about a documentary, so I did want to highlight, if you haven't seen it on PBS, and it's on PBS Online, there's a documentary called Free for All, and it's about libraries, and very interesting. And unfortunately, the most inspirational part of it was the Librarians of Congress, who delivered a very important message, and then I watched that, and then 2 days later, she was fired. But anyway, it's really interesting. It gives you a kind of interesting history of libraries that you don't necessarily hear. And I recommend, have you seen it?
I'm watching it while I'm working out, and so I have not watched all of it yet.
It's a great,
But
it's
it's
workout.
really, no, it's really well done, and it does get into a lot of the history of public libraries in America, which I learned a lot, and and kind of what the philosophical underpinnings of why we do what we do. It's really good. I would really recommend it.
And that's my library.
Okay. Betsy, do you have foundation news?
Unfortunately, I was not at the meeting yesterday, because I was at the city's budget deliberation.
Yeah.
So maybe Chantal can give us a report.
Yes. So it was a good meeting. We really did a lot of kind of maintenance stuff, just looking at the budget that we had reviewed last month, just took another strong look at that. We'll be finalizing the budget in June. We're on the same fiscal year the foundation is as the library, so that was good. We're in need of 3 new foundation board members because we'll have one person rolling off and we had another woman move, and So we're looking to add 3 new members. So if you all have any ideas, send them my way, but we're looking for diversity geographically. We would love to find an attorney who specializes in trust and estate planning. That would be a good one.
Can we send that to the budget applicants we had?
Oh, yeah.
From last time.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good idea.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then we are having our last author event on Wednesday, May 28th with Willie Blotton, who's a local Oregonian. And he's both a musician and a writer, and he's a screenwriter, and he's a good friend of a lot of us here. He's been coming here for many years, but he'll be at the Tower Theater, and that's kind of the biggest stage he's had yet. So we're excited to welcome him back, and that'll close out author for this year. And that's it, really. Yeah. Todd, is there anything else?
No, I do have one more library news.
Yes.
Just an update for you. I'm working on scheduling a work session for us. But not you, Bunny, sorry. Geez, don't smile too much. And I was looking at dates in August and September. It looks like September might work better with Jan McGowan, who worked with us before, to really talk about the future of the library. And so I will get back to you. It might be closer to June, because we were sending dates back and forth, and then I got sick, and then she went on vacation. So when she gets back, we'll get in there. But looking forward to doing that. The other piece of that is we are going to be talking about the future of libraries in an all-staff day, I believe in August. And we thought this would be a really neat time to have the board there to hear people's ideas to help inform us when we go in and talk about what the futures of libraries will be. So when I get the times for that settled in, I will get you information on that, or we'd love to have as many board members as possible. We'll also let, depending on how the election goes next week, all of our possible ones. And by the way, you saw Michelle was here and got to see that. I did send all the budget information to Laura Lice, who is also running through the Sisters area. And I'll send her this recording as well, so that she has information on the budget.
And I'm assuming if I want to share this packet with Laura, that's okay.
It is, everything is posted in public knowledge. It's actually all on our website.
I will share this.
Yeah,
Drop it off for her.
and I actually believe I emailed it to her already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Along with the recording of Robert's
5 years.
5-year projection and the county assessors talk as well. I sent that to all the budget committee members as well. Yes, that's my news.
One other little happening, we did have a novel idea.
Oh,
Yes. I was gonna say, right.
Thank you, and Lynn had to remind me, it's like this 2 weeks ago. That's the night that Todd was sick. But that went really well. It was at Summit High, and we had a good showing there, and I thought she was a great,
She's a really good
She was
presenter.
wonderful.
Yeah, no, it was good.
Yeah.
It was really good. Another year in the books.
Our second doctor,
Oh,
both Kaiser doctors from Northern California.
It's her second doctor.
Helen Tassini.
Oh,
But
that's interesting. Yeah, it's been so long ago that I've forgotten.
our second book.
Yeah, okay, well, self-review of the meeting, real quick, Betsy?
I appreciate Jonathan coming and talking to us and giving us some education and giving us the opportunity to talk about the purpose of special districts.
And then I also wanted to add, I was able to attend the Oregon Library Association Conference
Oh,
in Eugene a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was really helpful. It was really nice to see all the pieces of information from this last year kind of come into a big picture of how the library functions in our community and in our state, and to feel like, oh, I get, like, I knew I was getting it, but then to like really get it was
Right.
good.
Okay.
I think my favorite pieces were the author presentations and how the power of libraries in the community impact lives. The power of summer reading programs for kids. And I learned about talking books and the little cards that you can program.
Right.
That was really cool. So I appreciated being able to attend the conference. I appreciated all of the budget information and just being able to filter all that down into comprehensible information that was digestible. And our budget committee and the work that they do for us.
Right. Bunny?
I really appreciated, your presentation, and I especially wanted to say thank you for investing the money as you have done. I remember when you came to us and said, I wanna start investing in new things. It was kind of a scary proposition with public money, and you've been very successful, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I thought this was great. I do appreciate our dedicated budget committee and just the quality of the people that are willing to volunteer their time, because it is kind of hard to come in out of the blue and then absorb everything that's gone on for an entire year and plan for the future. So, yeah, I thought it was a very good meeting. Appreciate it a lot. So,
I echo all that. I really appreciate, I appreciate all of you. I get very wonky on the budget and I feel like you walked into somebody that's gonna nerd out on you and we're patient with that. So thank you. It's kind of fun. Nobody else really wants to hear me talk about that stuff. So you're forced to do it.
Run it past your wife at night. Right?
yes.
Yeah.
Did you know?
Not like-
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say was, American Library Association is meeting next month. And I'm planning on going, and for those of you who haven't gone, I mean, those meetings, ALA and PLA and OLA, and I really was sorry that I couldn't go to OLA this year. They're really beneficial because it provides you with context beyond just what we're doing here locally, and it helps. I mean, it's been a major factor, I think, in the quality of the boards we've had over the years, in having them be more well-rounded and better informed and better able to ask good questions. So, yeah. PLA, I think, will be coming up next spring. And those are actually, I would like those meetings even better than ALA because they're more focused on what we do. They're a little bit smaller and more manageable, and they're always really good quality. So
I highly recommend that.
yeah, no, they're great. So with that, I'll adjourn. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. What is it? Yeah.